Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti for unbiased conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. So it's our news roundup that we do every Sunday, and we got to start it off with the big news that not only broke the internet, but broke the world. CM Punk, for the first time in nearly 6 years, appears on WWE programming. It was WWE Backstage, the closing minutes of the show. So a lot of people are talking about it. You know, does this mean that he will return to WWE in the ring? Is he a sellout now that he has done this? We're going to talk about all that, plus the Revival Teasing AEW and a Twitter war between Dave Meltzer and Jim Cornette, the two most popular people on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. So Ralph, let's start with CM Punk.
Yep.
Now that he's joined WWE Backstage, does this mean he will eventually return in the ring with WWE?
Well, I mean, I certainly hope so. And I think that the one thing that came out of most of the reports that were being passed around as far as CM Punk and where he stands with WWE, so we know that he's not necessarily contracted to WWE. His contract is with Fox specifically so he can work the show as an analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Now, will that become something larger? I hope we see him at some point have at least one more match, a high-profile match at like a WrestleMania, which is something I can certainly see. I don't know if it'll happen this year, next year, 5 years from now. But, you know, a majority of the wrestlers that have left WWE, even if it's been on bad terms, eventually make their way back at some point to have, you know, one or a few matches.
Right.
The only one that necessarily hasn't, that was a high profile guy, was Macho Man.
Mm-hmm.
So if you listen to the reports also by, I think it was Brian Alvarez, he said that AEW did sit down with Punk and they made him a very large offer. So the other side of this is where is he in his life and what does he want to do? He may not want to wrestle. He may just like doing this because it is like an analyst position,
right?
And he can give his insight like a lot of former retired NFL players or professional athletes. So if you consider that AEW and if you believe that AEW actually made him a large offer to, I would assume, would be a in-ring return, and he turned that down, you know, there's got to be reasons for that, and you got to wonder, is one of those motivations that he just does not want to wrestle? So I think at some point we see at least one match out of him, depending on who the opponent would be that they'd offer to him. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, though.
Now, I'll agree with you for a lot of these, you know. I think it's more likely than ever that we will see him in a WWE ring. Not necessarily confirming it. Like some people are saying, oh my God, Punk to WWE confirmed. And they're already starting the rumors of him being number 30 in the Royal Rumble. He's winning. He's main evented. People are already starting that speculation. However, I think there's always been that avenue for wrestlers and WWE to make amends when things have not been that great and build that bridge again. Obviously, the 2K games have done that for many people. We talk about Goldberg, the Ultimate Warrior, Sting, Kurt Angle. I mean, you could go on and on and on, that they eventually make their return to the ring because of that video game. WWE Backstage here could be that avenue that we get. So he's even said that he's open to a return. It just has to, the right dollar amount has to be there. And he recently said in an interview it was like $25 million to come back.
Right.
Look
at the money they're paying people to work the Saudi Arabia shows, which I know this point was made by several other people. But if they're willing to pay that amount of money, and considering the amount of money that their Fox contract is worth, it's not like they don't have the money to spend.
Right.
And if they're going to spend that money on guys that are well past their prime, like Goldberg, you know, as an example, The Undertaker,
or guys that have never wrestled, like Cain Velasquez and Tyson Fury.
Yeah. If they're willing to throw the money around to do those types of things, you got to think that they're willing to pay a guy like CM Punk, who is, even at this point, he still would be a considerable draw. I mean, if you go to the WWE Backstage YouTube channel and you look at just the amount of views, I think the day after this happened, it was top 5 trending across YouTube. It had over 3 million views. I don't know what it has right now, but in comparison to all the other videos that were uploaded by WWE, I think the closest one was maybe 500,000.
Yeah.
So it's not like he won't be able to draw and people don't want to see it.
No, of course. I mean, it's been 6 years, and every time something bad happens in WWE, what's the most popular chant that comes out? CM Punk,
Right.
CM Punk. And, not to throw the speculations even more out there, but let's not forget this coming weekend, Survivor Series is in Chicago.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised, just for the sake of getting people to talk about it, he's in the front row at NXT War Games.
Mhm.
Not necessarily in a match. He won't be in a Survivor Series match. He won't be in War Games or NXT, but he will be in that front row. He was at StarCast when AEW was in Chicago. This just makes sense.
Right.
And of course, people will be talking about it being like, oh my God, one step closer to him being in the ring.
Well, he's closer to returning to in-ring competition than he's been in the last 6 years.
Yes,
At
definitely.
least he's at least gotten over whatever the issues were, at least it seems, with WWE. Because when he left, obviously that podcast that he did with Colt Cabana, there was a lot of dirty laundry aired there. He was really frustrated. He even admits this. He's grown as a person. There were a lot of differences that he had. He was frustrated with his career in the direction of creative. He was hurt. He was banged up. He was tired, which we see this time and time again, whether it's Stone Cold Steve Austin, CM Punk, Ultimate Warrior, Goldberg, whoever. That it's a rough business.
Yes.
And
Bret
some
Hart.
of them just need to step away for a little bit, collect their thoughts, and then they come back. So
So
we shall see.
now, obviously, there's a lot of frustration with some guys in WWE. A lot of them asking for their release. Luke Harper's asked for it. Sin Cara, Oney Lorcan has recently asked for his release. And one tag team that really has been talked about as far as a release, not renewing their contract, teasing, going to AEW, is the Revival. And they're back at it again. So during a house show, they posed like the Young Bucks. And obviously, with the way smartphones work, someone took a picture of it, tweeted, saying that they wouldn't post it. And not only did they retweet it, they turned it into their Twitter profile picture. Then Scott Dawson took to Instagram a couple days later, posted a picture with his family saying, money isn't everything, where Dash Wilder replied to that picture saying, let's be happy. So is this a tease that when their contracts are up, they will leave WWE to go to AEW?
Yeah. I think a lot of AEW fans would certainly want that to be the case. But such is the example, like Randy Orton, trolling everybody on Twitter and social media and within the wrestling community, getting people to talk about him. That could really all this be that could really be all this is again with the Revival here. And this isn't the first time they've done it. We know they have certainly been frustrated with the WWE and the direction of where they've been going. But I can't say confidently just because they posted something like this, it means they want out of WWE and they want to go to AEW. Now, do I think that's possible? Of course it's possible. But, other guys have done certain things like this. Randy Orton's probably the best example, most recent example. So I don't think it means they automatically want to leave. I'm not ready to push the panic button on them wanting out of WWE.
And you bring up Randy Orton, and these are two guys that have had a faction on TV with Randy Orton that they wish they could continue with it. And I don't know why they're not. It would have been great to continue that faction. And Randy Orton has teased multiple times on social media that he was going to AEW, especially that picture that he recently put on Instagram where he pointed at elite level, teasing and tagging everybody that, is rumored to be going to AEW once their contracts are up. I think the Revival are just playing along just like Randy Orton has. I don't think they have really that much intention to leave WWE. I think they get a better contract money-wise out of them. Yes, I understand the work rate is much higher when you're under contract with WWE, having to do 4 shows a week, whereas AEW right now is only doing 1, maybe 2 if it's a pay-per-view weekend.
Yep.
So, and eventually I think the Revival will be pushed like a top tag team regardless of how they're booked in WWE.
Yep.
Now, AEW, many would argue, have the best tag team division in the world. But you have the Young Bucks, Santana and Ortiz, the Best Friends, Jurassic Express. Where do the Revival fit in that picture? Are they going to be, lumped in the middle of all that? Or are they going to be the top dog or the big fish in a small pond kind of thing with WWE, where they don't necessarily book their tag teams strong.
They don't really book much of anybody strong these days.
True.
Either way.
But what I'm saying is there's a lot of tag teams in WWE. However, you only see maybe the same 6. The War Raiders, you see the Revival, the New Day, Gallows and Anderson are just starting to get shown more frequently. And that's about it.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly getting put on TV, whereas AEW, you're not, because there's so many tag teams and you're not going to be the top tag team, maybe the Revival are just doing this to get more money out of Vince McMahon.
And I think that was also a negotiation tactic that Randy Orton used. And anybody who is a professional wrestler under contract with WWE should be doing that, knowing that. And that's why maybe, however you want to look at this, the competition between the two companies is good for the talent for that simple reason. Because look, if WWE doesn't feel a team is worth it, there's always another alternative, especially now where it may not just be AEW. There are other companies out there. There's New Japan Pro Wrestling. There's other places for people to go and they can get paid and be happy and everything else. So WWE isn't necessarily like the end-all be-all as far as the wrestling industry is concerned. But if I'm a wrestler and I'm under contract with WWE and they're going to pay me X amount and AEW offers me this much, probably a good chance that WWE is going to match that, knowing that they don't want their talent jumping ship and going to the competitor.
Right.
At least the number 2 competitor now.
Definitely. So let's close out our show with what's going on Twitter between Dave Meltzer and Jim Cornette, because, everybody loves to talk about Jim Cornette and Dave Meltzer, whether you like them or not.
Right.
So Dave Meltzer was answering a tweet from a fan, and his response to this fan was, in regards to why people that are anti-AEW want them to fail so bad. And he said, they aren't fans of wrestlers or wrestling. They are people who grew up a certain way and fear change. That's it. If you're a fan of wrestling, you want everyone to do well and the most people to have a chance to make money and achieve their goals. So then Mr. Cornette chimed in and said, I would add, everyone do well, make money and achieve goals without putting on a shit show, without outlaw goofs and make people ashamed that they like wrestling or involved. That's just my 2 cents. So then I don't know why Meltzer even brought this up, but he brings Joey Janela into this because we all know Jim Cornette hates Joey Janela.
Yeah.
And I guess Meltzer was thinking that this is what he was talking about, but there's clearly different cases where Cornette could say, he doesn't like AEW for that guy or this guy or this guy. But here's his response. Joey Janela is a hell of a lot more realistic than Dr. Frank and Rough House Fargo. And you do realize that that's what many, if not most, of the wrestlers and promoters in the business said about Memphis in the 70s, and many have written in their book. So then Cornette responds, I could personally testify to the fact that either Sonny Fargo or Ken Dillinger could have kicked the shit out of Joey Janela and have fun doing it. You are making excuses for jackass wannabes cosplaying. Then Meltzer replies, it's not a real fight. Most uncharismatic middle card UFC heavyweights would kick the shit out of anyone virtually in the territories of the 70s. That doesn't make them a great pro wrestler. Janela works hard to get himself over. Fargo drew big. Both are fine. So then Brian Last, who is the co-host of the Jim Cornette Experience and all his podcasts that Cornette does, and he said, Janela works hard is becoming a frequent excuse for justifying his sloppy, and many would say dangerous work. It's never Joey Janela did great. It's always Janela works hard. More accurate would be Janela tries hard, followed by bless his heart. So basically saying that people are not necessarily saying he's a good wrestler, but just tries hard.
Yeah.
Then Joey Ryan chimed in on all this, and he said, Cornette has no interest in making wrestling better. His agenda is to divide the wrestling community by asking them to choose sides rather than grow us together like a family. He's toxic to the industry growth. Lot to divulge into this, Ralph. So what are your thoughts on everything we're hearing here?
I mean, it really hasn't been any different from the last couple times we've had this conversation about Cornette, Joey Ryan, the whole group that we just talked about. You can't deny that right now there is a change in the way that the talent is working in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very different in some cases in comparison to what you're seeing traditionally portrayed.
Right.
Now, I certainly understand where Jim Cornette is coming from, and I've expressed that on this show previously. And I think there's certainly room for comedy acts and for some of the Joey Ryans of the world and all of that stuff. So I'm not to the extent where I think that this stuff doesn't have a place in professional wrestling. I think Cornette's biggest concern or his biggest argument is that's the stuff that Joey Ryan does and some of the things that you'll see some of the other guys do, like Orange Cassidy as an example. And I'm not saying I agree with this. That's stuff that you see typically on the indie scene. Now, especially with AEW right now, bringing in some of this talent and trying to profile it on a high level and assume that, the masses are going to approve of all of this and accept it. That's where the divide comes in. So Cornette wants this to be presented as a legitimate sport. He wants to protect the industry and wants people to take professional wrestling seriously.
Right.
And there is the other half, or the new guard, if you want to call it that, who assumes that, everybody knows it's scripted. It's just here to have fun and not take it so seriously. And as long as you get a good show and you're entertained, then that's fine. If you're a fan of the new style of wrestling and you are of that mindset, it's going to be really hard for you to accept Cornette's perspective and point of view, I would think.
Right.
But I really think that's where the divide comes in. There's an old guard with an older mindset that doesn't necessarily like the direction that, this one company, I would say, because AEW is the company that is really profiling this on a high level. I mean, you could say Joey Ryan on Impact, but I mean, Impact's been around for how long? It's not like they have millions and millions of viewers. It's very small level right now. So really what you have is AEW portraying these guys in high profile positions, and some of the older wrestlers, Cornette obviously, as in his position, doesn't agree with their approach on the professional wrestling industry.
Now, and we've gotten comments against us, for whether agreeing or spotting faults with AEW or saying that we're not big fans of Orange Cassidy or Marco Stunt or things like Joey Ryan are kind of insulting to the industry, but there's plenty of people out there that don't mind it.
Yeah.
They're entertained. So if they're entertained, who cares about what it used to be back in the 70s, the 60s, and the territory days? Hulk Hogan was very entertaining, but a lot of people would say that he's not that good of a wrestler.
Right.
So wrestling is such a weird industry because it's a sport, but yet it's entertainment and
theatrics and
but yet no one wants to admit, as WWE calls it, sports entertainment. They don't call it professional wrestling. They call it sports entertainment, which at the end of the day, it is.
Right.
Having Joey Ryan flipping people with his genitalia is entertainment
to some people. Right. Yeah.
And Joey Janela doing whatever it takes for him to, as he says, wants to die in the ring is entertainment.
Right.
But then you get those people who, like Cody and Jericho and, wrestlers like them that have a traditional background that tell a story. And to them, that's entertaining. Yeah. So there doesn't necessarily have to be this divide like Joey Ryan is saying that Cornette is trying to create, but there kind of is.
Yeah. And here's a big part of the reason why Cornette says the things he says and why we have this divide. So if AEW fails and it does not, let's say it sticks around for a couple years and then people get sick of it and move on to something else like Cornette suggests, it will be very hard for any other wrestling promotion to latch on to any, get a mainstream TV deal. And that's his main thing. He wants to see the company, he wants to see the industry stick around. Outside of WWE, he's all for the competition. He wants somebody to compete against them. But the problem is, if there's not enough fans that are willing to watch wrestling, or, TV execs or networks and everybody else in between can't take wrestling seriously, that essentially hurts the business.
Right.
And that's his main point. So if you have a guy like Joey Ryan flipping people with his genitalia, as you pointed out, or you have a guy like Orange Cassidy or Marco Stunt, or any of the guys you want to lump them together in that group that are representing this new brand, new guard, new approach to professional wrestling, and it doesn't work because, the masses don't accept it, that's bad for wrestling because there will be no more, there's not going to be TV networks that are willing to waste their time, money, and effort on professional wrestling if there isn't a market for it.
Right.
And that's one of his biggest points. He wants the wrestling industry to progress forward, and the direction that he sees it going with these guys doing the things that they're doing, he doesn't think enough people will be open-minded enough to accept it, which will mean, AEW loses contracts, they get canceled, whatever, which is bad. That's not good.
Well, here's the thing.
I'm not saying I agree with him, but I understand where he's coming from.
Here's the thing. We see this in sports all the time where the game is evolving and traditionalists don't like it. You have in baseball, the shift. People hate the shift, but that's just the way the game is evolving. And starting pitchers don't go 7, 8 innings anymore.
Yep.
They only go 5 innings. But that's how the game is changing. In the NFL, you basically can't touch the quarterback without getting penalized because that's how the game is evolving. And, it's not really becoming a physical sport anymore because any physicality would end up in a penalty. The NBA, back then was focused on building teams from the ground up and not necessarily using the free agents to manipulate how their teams are going to be run.
Yep.
But that's how the game has evolved. Wrestling might be in that same thing. A lot of traditionalists might not like where it's going, where there's not heavyweights anymore. There's not, storytelling in matches. It's more circus Olay, circus, suicide dives, 450 splashes. And, can you believe how he did that? And then you have Orange Cassidy play kicking people and Joey Ryan flipping people over with his dick. And that's just where wrestling's going.
Yeah.
And MLB has made more money. NFL has made more money. The NBA has made more money. Why can't wrestling? Maybe as much as people might hate the direction it's going, we have for the first time in 20 years, someone to at least be close to competitively with WWE programming. You have all these different avenues of wrestling from New Japan Pro Wrestling, Ring of Honor, Impact, MLW, NWA, that are all doing their own different thing.
Yeah.
So it's not just, if you like wrestling, you got to watch WWE. AEW, for the most part, has helped change the industry because it's let other promotions be shown to the masses. Now I know a lot of them or all of them have been out longer than AEW because AEW has only been around for less than a year. But, you get to hear about these guys, where they came from. Like Kenny Omega, if you're just seeing him for the first time in AEW and you go, oh, he was in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So you go watch him in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then you're now introduced to Kazuchika Okada. And then you watch, Okada. And then you get introduced to someone stupid like Toru Yano.
Yeah. And not only that, you look at what's happened in the wrestling industry since AEW has been on Wednesday nights. Now you have Wednesday nights, you have AEW Dynamite, and you have NXT. So that is probably one of the nights that people look forward to most if you're a big wrestling fan. So
according to our poll, 96% say.
Absolutely. So, whether you disagree with it, you agree with it, right now is a really fun time in the wrestling industry.
It really is.
You're always going to get people that are going to choose sides, whether you ask them not to, or, it just kind of is what it is.
Right.
And, I think that Cornette, his mindset, some of the newer guys could actually learn from him, but I also think he could be a little more open-minded with some of the things he says and what he's accepting to, because the industry is changing. And it's either you change with what people want to see, or you get left behind and you die a slow, painful death. And,
right.
Nobody wants that. I want AEW to be successful. I want WWE to be successful. If I don't like what AEW is doing, I'll watch WWE. If I don't like what WWE is doing, I'll watch NXT or AEW or New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. So let us know what you think of everything that we talked about tonight, with including CM Punk, the Revival, Jim Cornette, Dave Meltzer, and the wrestling industry as a whole. Don't forget to like this video. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, SCPB Podcast. And for unbiased conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.